If you guys thought we were done with Life by You, think again. We've had a little bit more information about Life by You that I wanted to discuss and talk about the failure of the game and how it came to be that it got cancelled and the impact that it has on the future of life simulation gaming, because I feel like we've just taken one step backwards in terms of EA's domination and I don't like it. Life by You was being published by Paradox Interactive, which publish many different games from many different genres. Some of you may have heard of Crusader Kings or City Skylines, and Life by You was also being developed by Paradox but under the team called Paradox Tectonic, which is Paradox but it's not the same because it's being developed by Paradox Tectonic but published by Paradox Interactive. A little confusing. The game was originally teased in March 2023 and since then they've been incredibly open about the development cycle of the game, showing us teasers basically almost every single week since then. It was originally planned for release on September the 12th, 2023, would you believe? And then they delayed it to March the 5th, 2024. And then it was delayed until June the 4th, 2024. And now it's being delayed indefinitely. When it was first released, there seemed to be this huge wave of excitement from the live sim gaming community because obviously before then we've only had The Sims and Paralives was in development alongside it, although Paralives is an indie game fundamentally. This is the first time that we've seen a live sim from a AA company, so it was pretty big news. In the original teaser trailer, they seem to boast a lot of interesting things about the game, particularly talking about open world and showing off many features that are DLC in The Sims 4, but in the base game of Life by You, in addition to the open world. It seemed like they were really trying to make their mark as something completely fresh. And there were people who worked on previous Sims games who are in the development team, so people took it seriously. Something I think is of particular interest with Life by You is the amount of transparency they had with the development of the game. They were being extremely open, which is very, very rare, I think, for any developer to do. Indie developers are usually extremely transparent because they kind of have to be to get the Patreon support or the donations, but when you have the financial backing of shareholders and a big publisher name behind you, it's not all that common. And I always think there's a risk when doing that because most people, they don't really understand the development cycle of video games. They just see what's put in front of them and they judge the book by the cover. So of course people saw Life by You in its early state and they said, oh, you know, this looks terrible, this is bad, that's bad, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I would definitely say it's a risk to do something like that. Although to an extent, I think it did pay off because they got so much community feedback about the game. And I'm pretty sure that it helped to shape the development of it too. Although of course the strategy did not pay off because it got cancelled. And I think the saddest thing about this is not that we didn't get to play the game, but obviously lots of jobs have been lost because it wasn't just Life by You that was cancelled. It was every single Paradox Tectonic game as that development studio got shut down. And obviously people lose their jobs and it's not very nice. I don't really like the way the video gaming development world works in general. We're always hearing news of layoffs and things, including from Microsoft, who have been under some controversy lately, and EA themselves too. So it's a big issue and I hope they find new jobs very easily. One employee who was working on Life by You did actually release a post on LinkedIn talking about their experience and revealing some information that we didn't really know before based on Paradox's original statement about the cancellation. The post itself was very long and I won't read the entire thing to you, but according to the post, he described the development as going extremely well and that they got a thumbs up a few weeks before launch. And then a couple of weeks before the launch, they were told they wouldn't be launching and that they'd all just lost their jobs. Although allegedly they were only informed of this via a public announcement. I just want to say, like, that's kind of insane being like, imagine just finding out that you've lost your job from a public announcement. That's kind of shit. I hope that's not true. Supposedly they were not told why and they spent a month in purgatory, he described, and did everything to prove to them that they were worth launching, including doing things like finding potential buyers or suggesting cutting ties and going indie, and they heard virtually nothing back. He also mentioned how he was warned warned against writing anything about this experience, that it may hurt his future career or legal action. This is another thing I just think really sucks about the gaming community, because as well as all these layoffs and there's all these stories about things like crunch culture and sometimes being quite toxic in certain companies, and then a lot of video game developers, they sign these NDAs and they can't talk about anything, and it's like this whole thing of suffering in silence. Like genuinely, like video game development, I think it's just so toxic, like everywhere. I think it kind of sucks. In the official statement by Paradox Interactive, they suggested that they didn't feel like they would get to a point where they'd be close enough to a version they would be satisfied with, and suggested that's why they wanted to stop the development of the game. So it's a little bit in contrast to that LinkedIn statement. But of course, fundamentally, a video game does not get cancelled if they think it's going to be very, very good and very profitable. Obviously, something was wrong, and I think it is important to talk about these things. As I said before, they were very keen on community feedback, often talking a lot on YouTube and on Twitter and gaining feedback from the community there. The biggest thing I think everybody could categorically agree on was that the game did look very ugly, and I think that was 100% a big issue with the game, especially when you consider that life simulation games, they really are all about the aesthetics. If you think about any life sim game, I'm not just talking about The Sims, even games like Animal Crossing, for example, like it's all about building a pretty island. Stardew Valley, people seem to focus on making like beautiful looking farms. The whole cozy game or life sim game or simulation game genre is all about aesthetics. So that's obviously a really big thing to a lot of players. And I definitely think the character models held the game back. I said this for a very, very long time. I think ever since it was first announced, it was something that I criticized about it. I tried not to criticize it too much from the start, because obviously it was early on in development, but then time went on, and even though they did seem to improve a bit, they didn't massively improve, and they were still kind of weird looking. I came across this post on the Life by You Reddit where somebody found a game called Gym Simulator 24, and the character models apparently look really similar to Life by You. I mean, taking a look at it, they do look really similar. You can't deny they almost look the same. Even with like the weird shoulders, like the weird arm, though, you know, in Life by You, like the characters, they have weird arms and shoulders and weird eyes. They do look the same. So I think it's an interesting assumption to make. And then somebody else found these characters on the Unity asset store, and apparently they are free. I don't know anything about video game development, but apparently a telltale sign of these free Unity assets is the kind of like gorilla look, if you know what I mean, like the weird shoulders and hands. Obviously, we don't know if that's true. Like, this is just complete speculation, but if it was true, it would definitely explain a lot about how we weren't really that satisfied with their character models, yet despite the dissatisfaction, they weren't really changing over time. It would make sense. It was confirmed by Life by You. I believe it was on their Discord a while ago that they confirmed that they didn't use any like pre-made Unity assets for things like furniture. So they confirmed that was not true, although they didn't say anything about the character models, although it was said a long time ago, so I may have forgot. I will be honest, if that is true that they used Unity character models, then that is a red flag in my personal opinion. For a game like this, where character customization is a huge deal, I definitely expected the characters to look better in my personal opinion, and not just the characters, but even looking at the scenery and the backdrop, it reminded me a lot of The Sims 3 in that it's very, very dark, because I always remember The Sims 3 being very dark and The Sims 4 are so much brighter and cartoony in comparison. And Life by You definitely gave me Sims 3 vibes with the really strong contrasting shadows. And obviously graphically, I don't know how to explain it, but it kind of has a really shiny, glossy look to it, which just feels very outdated in my personal opinion. Another big issue that I mentioned before on YouTube, which I didn't really see many other people talking about, is like, what actually is Life by You? For a video game to do well, it has to actually have a direction thing or a goal. Whereas Life by You Sing was all about, you can mod it in any way that you like, you can customize it in any way that you like, you can do anything that you like. But to me, I've said before, that feels more like a tool rather than a game, if that makes any sense. I can customize the game in any way that I like, but what about actually playing the game? Because obviously that's a completely different thing. If you think about it in terms of literally any other video game genre, let's think about a game genre like, I don't know, RPGs, role-playing games, adventure games. Imagine an RPG that was just like, you can do anything that you want, you can create any character you want, you can do anything you want in the world. It's just this one big sandbox, and it's like, well, that's not really what an RPG adventure game is about, because it's got to have at least some kind of goal or direction. Obviously, with simulation games in general, they are a lot more open, but they all have something about them. Whereas I personally didn't feel like Life by You had that unique signature to make it special. It didn't feel like to me that it had a very specific purpose, which I think it needed. Being honest, I'm a little bit skeptical even of Inzoi, which I know is incredibly popular too, because again, I just feel like it doesn't really have much of a sense of purpose. With The Sims, for example, it's always had quite a chaotic side to it, and it's been quite goofy, and it's got a very interesting sense of humor about it, and it's got a very specific thing about The Sims, which is, you know, it's sandbox, but there's also the interesting thing of Sims deaths. We all like killing our Sims in unique ways, and then The Sims has all these different kind of like gameplay styles where you can play different ways. The Sims definitely does have multiple signatures, which in my opinion is why The Sims is very successful, but it's definitely not something that we saw with Life by You. With Paralives, which is basically the most popular upcoming life sim game right now, that to me feels like it does have a signature even in its early development. It feels really unique enough to stand out, and that's the main reason why I think it's performing so well. When I say performing well, I mean in terms of community response, because obviously it's not released yet. When you take a look at Life by You, it does look very generic, and that's looking at both the graphics and the gameplay based on what we've seen from their YouTube videos. Am I surprised that Life by You got shut down? I would say no, based on firstly the whole paradox issue with other titles that they've released, and the generic paradox issues that they're having that have been spoken about with their other games. It makes sense to me that perhaps they would be making some big changes. Secondly, I definitely think based on the way the game looked and felt in terms of what I've mentioned previously about the graphics and the lack of a vibe, that it wasn't really going to do that well. I can see that, being brutally honest with you guys. But I am also very surprised because I definitely think it had a lot of good things going for it. I've said before, it kind of feels like The Sims 3, and that's what I think a lot of simmers wanted. It's like when The Sims 4 first released and it was a little bit crap, and finally we had another big-ish video game publisher releasing a brand new live sim game, and finally The Sims is getting competition, and now they're getting less competition, so they're probably still going to be getting away with the cash grabby DLC. That's another tangent, another story, but I just feel like personally they potentially unveiled Life by You way too early. The game looked extremely rough around the edges, even leading up to the launch. Even though it was going to launch in early access, there was still a lot of issues coming from the community, which in my opinion shouldn't really be there for early access. Like, in my personal opinion, I really don't like early access, but I've always thought a game should only release in early access when the game actually looks great and it's in a playable state other than a few bugs and glitches, and obviously being incomplete. In my dream world, they would have given Life by You a completely fresh coat of paint. I think if they went down a completely different graphical route of making it look a little bit more simplistic and cartoony, kind of like The Sims, that would have definitely given it a more timeless style. And I think if they didn't unveil it too early and they focus on making Life by You feel like a very unique signature experience with its own special vibe, then it probably wouldn't have been cancelled, in my personal opinion, as a person who's not a professional video game developer who doesn't know what they're talking about, but that's just how I feel as a player. Obviously, we do still have other life sim games left. One's down, but we've still got Paralives and Inzoi. There's also apparently another one that's upcoming, which we know absolutely nothing about at this stage. I haven't spoken about it on YouTube before. That's because we don't know anything about it, but apparently somebody who used to work on The Sims is working on it. So there's a third one. It seems like in general, life simulation games are getting the attention of a lot of video gaming companies for some random reason. It's this brand new genre, even though The Sims has been out for like over 20 years now. So I wouldn't really call it a new genre, but more so just a genre that finally other developers and publishers are considering tapping into, which I think is really, really great. Hopefully the failures of Life by You will not negatively tarnish life simulation gaming in general and put off other companies from developing life sim games, because we desperately need some more. You guys let me know what your thoughts were on the development of Life by You, and if you were planning on getting it or not. I'd be interested to know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.